Welcome. We're here today as part of the Spirit Board Imagining's Member Highlight Show. And that's where my wonderful friend and collaborator, Jan Jeremias, and I um, look to uplift, inspire, and transform. And really, we want to celebrate really the amazing members of our community, the Spirit Board community. And so we hope through these heartfelt conversations that we help you to get to know the incredible souls behind our wonderful community, their journeys, their passions, and the wisdom they bring. And so let's settle in and join us as we explore the stories that connect and uplift us all. And today I am really happy to have here with us is Kimberly Lechnick. And I would just give you the opportunity to share a little bit about what you do, Kimberly, because I know that you have a lot of experience in various areas, and share a little bit about what you do. What's lighting you up these days?
Mm. Well, thank you so much, Mary Jane and Jan, for having me for this very beautiful conversation. We actually had some conversation prior to the infamous record button. My name is Kimberly Lechnick, and I am a relationship coach. Uh, and I empower ambitious professional women to embrace their self-worth so they can experience fulfillment and transformation in their relationships. And on the other side of things, my creative side, as I like to call it, although my creativity does go into and throughout my coaching, is the executive producer and show host of both a streaming television show and a podcast, The Power of a Moment.
Wow.
And so that's a brief, short, intro into a little bit of who I am, right? I call it a snapshot.
That's a really good description of it, though. But that's cool. So, yeah, that well, welcome here, and I just know you always have such in conversations when we've been in our audio events, etc. Before, I know we've there you always bring some valuable insights into the mix, and they always make the little light bulb go off over my head and going, oh, never thought of it that way, but it's really cool. So I love that you share those little bites and insights into that. But
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Mary Jane, because, oftentimes when we're emoting about, the physical planet, the planet, we don't always get to hear, that we do make a difference, that we do impact. Of course, we can say it to ourselves, that we impact, that we make a difference, but it is so kind and generous of you to share that. Because it's kind of like just that little piece where you can say, okay. It's almost like for me, it's God speaking and saying, like he's speaking and saying, yeah, how I designed you and how I made you, it does make a difference if you're following the path that I've designed for you.
mhm, absolutely.
And I love that because I was listening to something recently and we were talking about this idea that, I think we grow up and, you think that, we all kind of have this image of like, we want to be noteworthy, we want to be famous, we want to be, have zillions of followers and whatever. And then basically that's how much of the percentage of the population. It's very, very minuscule, those people. But each one of us in our own circles and within our own sort of groups makes a huge difference in people's lives. And so just to like remember that, as I know that, for you in your community, the power of the moment, we each have, whatever you want to call it, a passion, a calling. I always looked at what I did as a calling. It was like I didn't have a choice. It was just but we all have something we bring and to remember that about ourselves and about the people that we're with because I think if we get hung up on that kind of like, oh, I want to like well, maybe you want to be infamous instead of famous, but like but the whole idea of being whatever out there and being known by everybody or whatever, then I think you end up feeling like you don't make a difference and that you're not important. And I think each one of us, as we all demonstrate, has a role.
Absolutely. For me, it's never been about that. And I think that in society, you know, and I'll use motherhood for example. So we relocated back from Southern California to the Midwest, where, I mean, we were both born and raised. So we moved back and we got the house and all the things and I was just so excited, it's like my first official, because we were in townhomes, are nice. I consider them home, but like it was like my family was beginning. So I had the home and I'm a creative, so I love, like, oh, what am I going to do with the flower beds and everything? And I realized quickly, and it was so surprising and eye-opening to me, that the majority of everyone worked full time, like outside of the home, and took care of their families. But I mean, I was fortunate to be able to stay home with my kids. I didn't, what their experience was their experience. I mean, it didn't even really crossed my mind. But what I quickly realized is that that was not welcome, because I would hear comments like, "Oh, what do you do?" Well, Johnny is coming home from school. You could probably watch him. Or Emma's going to be or I'm going to be late from work, and I think you can take care of her. So I found myself, in this space where everyone thought that I had nothing to do, and their role was to give me something to do.
Yeah. I love that story, but I mean, it reminds me of, and I'll be the first to say, I mean, I grew up in a very, very career oriented, and I remember meeting people who were stay-at-home parents and basically having a very negative, like, sort of perception of them of like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I can't believe they stay home, and then years later, as I matured, I call that my like 24-year-old brain kind of thing. All of a sudden when I matured, realizing that, as I spent time with a lot of friends who were, a lot of the women who came to my yoga classes, for example, were a lot of stay-at-home moms and things like that. And
Mhm.
realizing that, wow, how lucky were they and how lucky were their kids? And the fact was that it was just like all of a sudden I had a totally different perception and realized how wrong I had been. Like, I mean, I think it's a personal choice depending on the situation, but it was kind of like no longer did I have this sort of elitist attitude, like, which, now I'm almost embarrassed to say, but I really was. I was like this naive 24-year-old who was very sort of, women should go out and go to work and can do anything a man can do. And why should they have to stay home? I mean, I do have to say that I have two neighbors that are stay-at-home dads.
Mhm.
And
Awesome.
so, yeah, which is awesome. Like both across the street, they live next door to each other and they're adorable, kind of thing. As I see them out with strollers and everything, it always makes me like, it's just so sweet to me.
Yeah.
But, um, but that whole like, so sometimes I mean, it's so like almost, I don't know, we get so fixated in our ways when we're young. We kind of have this image in our heads and we're like no flexibility at all. Like but that wasn't my choice. That was the last thing I wanted to do for where I was at that age.
Yes.
It wasn't what I wanted. And one thing that I just have to laugh because you talked about getting a house. And I said, I remember when I first, I lived with I had like a zillion roommates and everything. And then I moved into an apartment on my own. And I remember the big deal, and I had to go to the laundromat because we didn't have a laundry in the building. So I had to go to the laundromat. And then I moved into an apartment where we actually had a laundry in the building. And I was so excited. And then when I got my first house, and I was like, oh my gosh, I get my own washer and dryer, and I don't have to share it with anybody. It was such like I had arrived kind of thing, you know. So that's what it reminded me of. It was like, oh my gosh, I get to do laundry whenever I want, and I don't
I
have
just love, yeah,
and
I
I don't
just,
have to have change.
well, what I really loved about it is that I had, we talk in business, and when we're talking, really kind of in our business mind, and our purpose mindset, we talk about having this vision. So for me, like you got to see a part of really honestly what I was creating from a really young age,
Mhm.
right? I had that my parents separated, right? So then there was different things that happened. So when I got into this house, it was like I had actually manifested my destiny, right? Like that was the moment when I was like, wow, not only, I could really feel it, husband, children, home, fence, dog, like this was really manifesting. Now, when you talk about working, I worked from a very young age. So I was working 13, 14. I worked, I mean, that's what. So I worked all the way up until my late or my no, my early 30s because that's when my first son was born. So I kind of felt like, of course I'm going to go back to it. Of course I'm going to, um, be, in that space. The vision just only got bigger. So, yeah. So, anyway, that's kind of what came up for me. So, it's like part of the bigger vision, but yeah.
I love that. It's so interesting because of the conversation of what you're saying about how people received you, right? And it was like one of those things because I mean, I remember I lived in a small town when I was born in a small town and lived there until I was 8 going on 9. And my mom had done some seasonal work, but she always was basically stay-at-home mom. And so it's interesting because in that scenario, and because which is a story for another time, but since there's such a huge age gap in my family, like I'm the baby and my brother's 14 years older than me, and then I have two older sisters than that. So
Oh, wow.
there's a quite a gap. So for I guess because of the generation of when I was coming along, and it wasn't such a thing when I was in my small hometown. But when my parents separated, my mom decided to move to the big city, to Toronto, far away. It was almost like I was embarrassed to say that my mom was a stay-at-home mom. It was like one of those things where I was like, so, because I saw how much living basically as a single parent so far away and doing things to make ends meet and babysitting and doing whatever it was that she was doing, it was almost that scenario where it's just like, okay, well, in my brain, I'm thinking, I don't want to be, struggle like that. I don't want to be that because in my head, it was just like, and because all of the kids I went to school with in the big city had both parents were out working outside of the home. And it's only as you mature, I realize it's like, oh, like, I'm like, well, my mom may have not worked outside of the home, but she certainly worked hard. So it's just those realizations those aha moments as you get a little bit older and realize, yeah. And then I realized, the benefit that actually afforded to me, being in the scenario like that, where she was able to volunteer at my school and do different things and go on, field trips with the class and different things that she was able to do with me that a lot of other parents, moms specifically, weren't able to do. And it was just like, I'm like, oh, in hindsight, my adult brain went, oh, that was actually a good thing. But
So
it's
good.
it's funny. It's funny, but I love that. So it's like, so what does Kimberly do now? Because I know that you do lots of things. So like, what is it that lights you up these days? What is it that you're really doing that's making your heart
Well,
sing?
oh my goodness. I'm a natural born teacher. And so I find that a lot of the spaces that I'm in, I'm teaching, and it's just my jam. I have a way of condensing down information and sharing it. But, like we talk, for instance, in the power of the moment about resilience or adaptability, or, these things are skills. And so for me, teaching has been honed from a very, very young age. Again, we really need to be open to kind of leaning into what our gifts are. And so, um, I, again, I'm a relationship coach for those empowering, those ambitious professional women, but there's a reason behind it. So, just to briefly kind of chat about that, the reason being is that women are the heartbeat. And I think we kind of talked about that, this afternoon. They're the heartbeat of the family. And with that, now that we've transitioned as women, we have a lot of competing priorities. Jan even mentioned, sometimes the dads are watching the children, right? But that doesn't mean the mom is, relinquishing her role as mom. In fact, a lot of the women that I work with, they're finding that's another plate for them to spin. So I work with these ambitious professional women to embrace their self-worth, because sometimes in the middle of that, we were talking today in the power of the moment about change and what is change, and what does it mean to transition. We were talking about all of those things. As women, we're doing a lot of those things. And I find that when we can support the woman, it really makes that foundation that much stronger. On the other side, my creative brain, I actually produce, and I'm learning to direct film and produce podcasts. And again, these are all skills. These are things that your listeners can do over the time that you ladies are engaging in. And so I love that. And I love it again, not for what Jan was talking about in regards to the fame or being famous. It's not like that at all. For me, it's using my gifts and my talents to support not only women in this regard, but men in this regard, to see that film, podcasting, media can really make a difference in your branding,
Hmm.
right? And highlight and elevate it. And so I do that. And then I was just talking to one of my mentors before I popped on, and he has a speaking program. And within his speaking program, I've now assumed a role as a facilitator for his training program. And so, again, another opportunity for teaching, learning, growing, using the gifts that we were blessed with to make a difference and to make the world a better place. And a lot of times people think, make money, like, yeah, make money along the way. Because we all need to earn a living, right? We all need to earn a living, so there's nothing harmful about that. In fact, it's really honestly in the Bible if you take a look and you study it more deeply. So that's a little bit about me. I hope I wasn't too long-winded, Mary Jane.
Of course not. No, no. Absolutely not. No, it's nice to hear, you know, the underlying mission behind what people do because it's like, what was the word you used, Jan, for yours? Because it's like for me, it's just like, yeah, I call it mission. It's just because it feels like it's something that's been handed to me, and there is whatever you want to call God, spirit, source, whatever you want to, all that is, whatever you want to refer to higher being is. I feel like this is something that's been given to me as my purpose for what I need to bring to the world. And as I'm sure you probably know, because I'm sure Kimberly, you've heard me mention it when we've been on the audios as well, and I know Jan knows for sure, was for me, it's kindness, empathy, and compassion, starting with me first and radiating that out into the world. And it's just as I've grown over these past many years when I'm doing more self-development work, more inner work, more looking within, I realize that this is something that's always been part of who I am.
Mhm.
And now, just now, I'm becoming more aware of it and leaning into it even more because as I lean into it, I feel the energy that creates, and it feels very empowered because it just feels like this is the authentic Mary Jane. This is me. This is what I'm here to bring. So I just love how you share that. How about yours? What was the word, Jan, that you used for it? I call it mission
Calling.
calling. There
Yeah.
you go.
And yeah. And I think that that's what it feels like. It's almost like, for me, it's always been, I can speak from my own experience. It's almost like I didn't have a choice.
Hmm.
It's just like this is what I'm meant to do. This is what I've been called to do, and I've just got to do it. And I think what you described, like Kimberly, I can see gets that, it's that kind of for me, when I teach yoga or work with people, it's my happy place. Like that is my happy place. Like it's not even like when they say it's not work. I mean, I'm having such a good time that I
Yeah.
feel almost selfish in the fact that I'm getting far too much out of this. And the people are just, and I obviously want to help people, but it's kind of like this feeling of like, I don't know if this is helping them, but I feel wonderful, kind of a feeling inside.
Hmm.
But that's so, to be able to do something and have that be your experience, like what a gift like a blessing we all have, to be able to like have something that we do where we're like, oh my gosh, this makes me sing, kind of thing, or this makes my heart sing, which
Yes.
is, and so when Kimberly talks about helping women who I so under, like, I mean, having worked around enough women through the years and worked in, pretty major cities and meeting women who that whole like, who would say, oh, the hardest part of my day begins at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock when I've got to go home and I've got to like, all of a sudden I have my other job.
Change your
That's
hats.
right. Changing hats. And I think it's really hard to change hats. And I think it's hard to go to work when you have like certain things going on at home. Like I never was not something I ever, I think it's a really challenging place to be. And not to have the things like the guilt come in and all those other emotions which tend to surface. So,
Well, I
yeah.
think, Jen, you bring up such a valid point. And I think that when I talk about the gifts, it's like I have over 20 years supporting children and families. And so within that experience, to be able to support that woman when she puts on her hat, especially, when she's in the midst of that transition and she puts on that hat in regards to having to do the second job. But again, for me, that's a mind shift, right? So
Mhm.
if we shift and say, oh my goodness, I get to go home and be with my family, right? I get to go home and be with my family, but being with my family doesn't require me to be depleted. Being with my family and having that quality time can happen during dinner. See, we tend to forget about those things, or we don't even know about them, that the routine of it all are opportunities where we can really connect in we can really connect in with our kids and we can really make that a quality experience in the car, making dinner, bath time, story time. These
Mhm.
are all things that need to get done, but we can do them with love and joy, right? We can do them with that mindset shift, knowing that we get to do them, right? And the experience then becomes something so much larger than ourselves, right? So,
Absolutely.
Mary Jane, that reminds me of our conversation that we had a few weeks ago about, the to-do list and
Mhm.
shifting it from the I have to do this to I get to do this to Darlene, our beautiful members, next step, which is I'm blessed to be able to do this. And that's what to me you're describing so beautifully, Kimberly, is this idea of like, we read in preparation for that episode, Mary Jane and I were preparing. There was this story about this woman who had decided that she was going to stay home with her baby. And she said she was so excited. And all of a sudden, one day she woke up after like a year saying, oh my gosh, I've got to make the baby lunch or something. And all of a sudden, she realized like she was like, it sounded like a task or a chore. And she said, all of a sudden, she realized, like, oh my gosh, like I was so happy. And she decided to shift it because she realized like she had forgotten like that kind of feeling of like, oh my gosh, I forgot that I wanted to do this and that really I do want to do this. And I
Mhm.
think it is so much of what you describe is kind of like taking those things that we quote unquote have to do anyway and really
Mhm.
looking at them like as like, oh my gosh, I really get to do this.
and some people
Yeah.
might think that's like a rose garden. Like, what are you talking about? This is not, this is not fun. What do you mean I get to do it? That's because our minds haven't yet shifted, right? But you sure know that that child is really excited. I had bumped in on Instagram, and I have to get this gal's name. I wanted to go back, but her name was Erica. I can't remember her last name. Starts with a K. And she was talking about our kiddos and what's kind of happening with them in regards to their mental and emotional health. And she makes some excellent points. Looks like she's doing a lot of research and she has a lot of position papers or something. I have to go back and look at the information. But a lot of the things that she was saying are exactly spot on. And when we do that as women and we're able to shift that, right? I get to do it, right? Because again, there's times for me, I'm an entrepreneur. Sometimes it feels like the house can gobble you up because not only are you balancing the responsibilities of being a business owner, but you have a whole host of other responsibilities. But again, going back to when Mary Jane was asking me about a little bit about myself, and I perked up and I started smiling about the house. It's the same thing. It's like, I get to have this house. What is it that we can do as a team to take care of it?
Mhm.
So it can be well taken care of, and that it is a nice place where everyone, loves to come and be. But I think that for me, a lot of the women tend to want to get out of the home because of the overwhelming responsibilities of what the home signifies in a lot of instances, because it's never ending. It just, your job, it just
It's true.
doesn't end. It goes on and on.
Very true.
Yeah. It just reminds me of like this whole idea of having a moment where you get to like just be, neither one, which Mary Jane and I talk a lot about in our workshops and on, it's just to be when you're not working and you're not doing stuff, you're not in your, let's say, entrepreneurial or work mode, and you're not in your house mode and like parent mode where you just get to be with yourself.
I
And
love
I
that so much.
think that was when I taught yoga, that was like one of the biggest things was like being able to get out of the house and not, and leave the cell phone in the car kind of thing, because cell phones weren't allowed. And so you were not reachable. So for that hour or hour and a half, you had total time to you.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really, you need that buffer. You need that time to kind of process and reflect and to ground yourself.
I love that, Jan. I know for me, self-care is really important, finding things. And I know when I ask myself, like, I'm feeling kind of different, inside my body. Oh, and I look and take inventory and I'm like, didn't really lean into that self-care the way I normally do. I'm
Mhm.
human.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
Yes.
right.
Yes, it's the whole idea, right, of that you hear this phrase out there is it's like remembering that we are not called human doings, we are called human beings, right? And allowing ourselves that space and the grace of being able to take whatever small opportunities, even if it's just 5, 10 minutes, to yourself, just to be able to be with yourself because we all have value and we need to replenish that thing that adage of you can't fill somebody from an empty cup. You need to fill from a cup that's overflowing, and so we need to replenish that in ourselves to bring that energy back to ourselves so that we're able to look at it from the mindset perspective of, oh, I get to do this. I'm blessed
hmm
to do this.
One of the things too is coming up is when I don't know what your experience is with what you ladies are doing, but a lot of times, again, when we're in the midst of the transition, so like let's say we're making a transition from work to home or home to work, a lot of times we don't prepare ourselves for that. We don't think that we need to prepare. And today we were talking about micro routines. And I'm thinking, wow, that is a fantastic spot to put in and insert a micro routine. What would make that transition a little bit smoother, where I could just slide into work or slide home, what could we do? Because for me, I don't know, again, it's important for things to be light and fun. Um, and yeah, I don't know. That just came up for me.
No, I mean, I do. Oh, sorry, Mary Jane.
No, no, go ahead.
No, I do think it's extremely important. And I know for myself lately, one of the things that I'm practicing is this kind of like buffer around things. It's like, so that if I do something, it was like the day I realized that I make my own schedule. Who would have thunk it? Because I was booking myself, 11, then 11, 11 to 11:30, and then 11:30 to 12, and back to back and back. And all of a sudden I was like, barely allowing myself time to use the restroom, and then all
Mm,
of a sudden I thought, oh, you make your own schedule. Like you are an entrepreneur. You can decide how many meetings you're doing in a day,
hmm
and you can give yourself a 15-minute buffer between stuff to have a breath, to process what you did, to move on. And I almost feel like if people were to give themselves a buffer, and it doesn't need to be anything major. It could be like for me, it was always that time that I had when I mean, I had a long commute home after work. And so it was always that time where I was on public transportation at that time. So I wasn't driving, where I could sit there and just be and didn't need to, you know, just chill out for a half an hour and breathe or do whatever I was going to do.
Mhm.
I mean, I actually started meditating because I was doing meditation and it was like time when I couldn't move. I was like, this is the perfect opportunity to do meditation because I can't go anywhere anyway. So I used to meditate, but it's just like to just give yourself a little space and to actually value those spaces as prep time or psychological or emotional prep time to kind of leave what happened at your workplace behind, and to kind of transition over. So those buffers.
Absolutely. It is very key. It's very important to allow that time and space. I like that for those transition periods. I like how you're, Kimberly, you were speaking to that of like moving from one to the other so that you're not having these hard stops butting up against each other, as Jan was alluding to in her booking back to back to back things, allowing that space. Um, to let the mind flow a little bit freer, not have to be so rigid in its structure, so to speak. I mean, there's a time and a place for that, of course, as well. But we need that flow time where it's more ease and grace. It's just I think it's key for what we do. But this what an amazing see this is why I said I love these conversations because we never know where they're going to lead. But Kimberly, if people wanted to reach out and connect to you, what are some of the ways they might be able to do that, to learn a little bit more about you or to connect?
Well, I would love to connect with everyone on LinkedIn, definitely. Uh, I'm also on Clubhouse now. So we have our live audio conversations on Clubhouse. So we have a community that's expanded in 2025 over there. So which is lovely. So definitely LinkedIn. But I would invite people also to um, just send me a message via text, 630-715-2324. And I would love to have a conversation. Just like we're having a conversation this morning. That's where it starts. That's where relationships start. They start with a conversation and they just build over time. And so I would love to have a conversation with you and learn more about you and your experiences.
Very, very key. And thank you for sharing that. Yes, because that's the whole idea behind building community, is to build those support networks of people that are going to help lift you up and inspire you, and maybe even just to make it you realize saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm not alone." So that's really what Jan and I really have, a vision for this community is to realize that we're not alone in this experience of life, and just building a valuable community of heartfelt fun people around around us. So that's great. Thank you.
So thank you for joining us for this inspiring conversation on the Spirit Born Imaginings member highlight showcase. We hope you found wisdom, connection, and a spark of inspiration. If you love this conversation, be sure to like or comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an uplifting story. And remember, keep shining, keep growing, and keep transforming. Until next time, have a great one.
Thank you.